Liang Yu teaches Zhang Yi martial arts every day in exchange for food, while the students take the food to care for the women in the village. Just like the saying, a leopard cannot change its spots. After lunch, everyone else is responsible for cleaning, except Lu Karen, who looks somewhat sullen. Seeing this, Zhang Yi calls her over and says, Lu Karen, I noticed something was off in your eyes during lunch. Lu Karen quickly waves her hands and says, Brother Zhang Yi, it's nothing, I'm fine. Lu Karen, who is as innocent as a blank sheet of paper, cannot hide anything on her face, which Zhang Yi, with his keen eye, quickly notices. He flicks her on the forehead and says, sit down. Why are you acting so mysterious with me? Just speak your mind. Remember, we are family. You shouldn't keep secrets from your own family, understand? Lu Karen looks around to make sure no one else is in the living room before she relaxes. She whispers to Zhang Yi, big brother, why did you agree to protect those students? They are very bad. You must have seen what they did before. Those guys are not good people. After the apocalypse, Yang Xinxin and I were bullied terribly. To keep Teacher Liang, you have to support them for a lifetime? Why? Lu Karen asks, puzzled. Zhang Yi looks at Lu Karen meaningfully, then affectionately touches her forehead and says, don't worry, it won't be for too long. The outside environment is so harsh. These weaklings will soon die of cold or starvation, and I also have some preparations. Lu Karen suddenly realizes, big brother is really big brother, never letting me down. Zhang Yi shushes her, some things are better not discussed at home. Tomorrow, let's go out and look for materials to repair the shelter. I'll tell you more about it then. Lu Karen's worries disappear, and her face brightens with happiness. Okay, big brother, but where will we find the materials? There's a material factory not far from here. We can check it out. Okay, then I'll go prepare a list of materials. Watching her leave, Zhang Yi starts to ponder. It's time to let the outsiders take action, to get rid of that useless pack of wolves. The people from other forces aren't my subordinates. They won't just obey me. I have to wait for the right moment. In the afternoon, Chun Lei is in charge of collecting materials. Zhang Yi uses his spatial abilities to transport ice blocks. Liang Yu handles the cutting, and Uncle Yu is responsible for the construction. Uncle Yu, bring the materials here. Pay attention to the joints between the ice bricks and the steel bars. Alright, while everyone is busy, Zhang Yi casually sees some figures moving on the opposite bank of the river. He takes out his binoculars and sees Wu Chenyu sneaking into a room with a young woman. At that moment, Chun Lei collapses from exhaustion, but Zhang Yi watches the scene through the binoculars with interest and laughs. Such a hopeless case. It seems that the food we gave you is still too much. Then, Zhang Yi calls Liang Yu over. Teacher Liang, you better go back and feed the students. It's getting late. By the way, I think I owe you an apology. Liang Yu, puzzled, asks, apologize for what? Zhang Yi sincerely said, I always thought your students were selfish, but I just realized that I was wrong about them. I just saw one of your students helping a poor girl across the river in that house. He must still be happily helping. You should hurry and send him some food. Liang Yu immediately realized that her student might be up to no good again, and she turned and ran towards the opposite bank of the river. Inside that room, Wu Chenyu blocked the door with a wooden board. Looking at the woman sitting on the bed, looking exhausted, he thought, I used to find the top girls in Heavenly Sea City, and now I have to settle for this village girl. The woman respectfully stood by the bed. Wu Chenyu pulled out half a box of food from his chest and threw it on the bed, saying coldly, be proactive, I don't have time to dilly-dally. The girl slowly undressed and climbed onto Wu Chenyu's body. Soon, sounds that made one blush echoed in the room. By then, Liang Yu had arrived outside the house. Hearing the indescribable noises inside, she was stunned, unable to believe that it was her student inside. In the post-apocalyptic world of Su Family Town, women had lost the main breadwinners of their families, making even survival difficult. Thus, it was unlikely that love was the motive. She must have been coerced or was trading her body for something. As a woman, Liang Yu couldn't allow her hard-protected student to bully another female. With this in mind, Liang Yu kicked open the door. Wu Chenyu, shirtless, suddenly sat up. Seeing Liang Yu, his face turned pale. Liang Yu looked at the numb-faced woman in front of her and then at the box of food on the bed, and everything became clear to her. Her mind went blank. Wu Chenyu was also stunned, but then thought, since the matter was already exposed, why not just be straightforward? After all, Teacher Liang was kind-hearted and might even forgive him. Wu Chenyu brazenly asked Liang Yu, Teacher Liang, I'm a young man with needs. I hope you can understand me. Besides, she and I are consensual. I did not go against the woman's will. Saying this, Wu Chenyu patted the woman's face. The woman emotionlessly looked at Liang Yu and then numbly nodded. Liang Yu's face remained calm, her shock and anger leaving her somewhat at a loss. She simply looked coldly at Wu Chenyu and asked, aren't we short on food? Then why use it for this? Wu Chenyu's face changed slightly, knowing he couldn't reveal to Liang Yu how the food was obtained. Since Liang Yu left, the order among the students simplified. Leveraging his strong build, Wu Chenyu gathered a few capable classmates and took over the entire group. Thus, he not only had enough to eat, but also had surplus to exchange for services from the women of Su Family Town. Gritting his teeth, Wu Chenyu yelled at Liang Yu, Teacher Liang, why must you meddle so much? Just keep providing us with food. That's all you need to do. We're not getting enough food every day anyway. It's better to let a few eat their fill and let the rest fend for themselves. You just just need to provide the food. How we distribute it among ourselves is our business, not yours. Liang Yu was struck as if by lightning, unable to respond for a moment. Then, Wu Chenyu, somewhat displeased, pulled the woman closer and said, "Teacher Liang, could you please leave for a bit? You're ruining the mood," which is quite rude. Wu Chenyu had reached a point of recklessness, confident in Liang Yu's compassionate nature, knowing that no matter what he did, Liang Yu would not simply ignore them. After all, the kind-hearted teacher Liang could not bear to watch her students perish in this post-apocalyptic world. Liang Yu closed her eyes, her mind blank, and then she rushed out. At that moment, Chun Lei and Zhang Yi were eating, and seeing Liang Yu return looking distraught, Zhang Yi said teasingly, "Your student is really a model of helpfulness." Liang Yu looked up at Zhang Yi without intending to argue, but said despondently, "Do you always think I'm a fool?" Before Zhang Yi could respond, she answered her own question. "Yes, I really am foolish." Zhang Yi, hands in pockets, said lightly, "Don't blame me for letting you see the truth. Reality is cruel, but I won't interfere in whatever you choose to do next. I will respect your decisions." Liang Yu nodded without responding. Her mind was in turmoil, and her eyes lost focus as she walked aimlessly toward the shelter. She just wanted to be alone. Chun Lei, curious, came over and asked, "Boss, what shocked her like this?" Zhang Yi, with an indifferent tone, replied, "She saw her student bullying a girl from Su family town, probably using the food I provided for a dirty transaction." Chun Lei's eyes widened. "I was wondering what you were watching with those binoculars. Why didn't you let me see such exciting stuff? That's really not cool." Zhang Yi, exasperated, said, "Is that your main concern?" Back at the shelter, Liang Yu locked herself in, squatting in a corner lost in confusion. She realized that all her efforts since the apocalypse seemed futile and self-deluding. After a long while, a knock on the door brought Liang Yu back to her senses. She heard Zhang Yi's concerned voice from outside. "Liang Yu, are you alright?" Liang Yu gathered her emotions, wiped her slightly red eyes, and opened the door. "I'm sorry, Zhang Yi. I'll make up for the work I missed today. I just wanted to be alone for a while." She thought Zhang Yi was there to urge her to work on the defenses. Zhang Yi waved his hand. "No rush. The defenses can wait a couple of days. I was a bit worried about you, so I came to check on you." This unexpected concern momentarily stunned Liang Yu. Then she replied with a blush, "I'm fine. I just really needed some quiet." Zhang Yi looked into the room and smiled. "Are you going to make me talk to you from the doorway?" Liang Yu awkwardly stepped aside. "Come in and sit." Zhang Yi made himself comfortable on the bed, and then said gently, "I know what happened with your student hit you hard, but life must go on. I hope you won't think too much about it." Then Zhang Yi gave a neighborly boyish grin. "Actually, if you ever have any troubles in the future, you can come and talk to me. I'm a pretty good listener." Zhang Yi knew that women are most vulnerable emotionally after a setback, and he didn't mind having another woman fall for him. In fact, Zhang Yi didn't really intend to take advantage of Liang Yu. He merely wanted to foster feelings in her to increase her loyalty. Hearing this, Liang Yu's mood did lighten a bit. "Zhang Yi, do you all think I'm foolish?" Zhang Yi communicated with her through his gaze for 2 seconds before saying, "Sometimes, it's really hard to understand." Suddenly, Zhang Yi changed the tone of the conversation. "But I also believe you must have your reasons." Liang Yu looked up at the ceiling, recalling her past. "I was sent to learn martial arts at the age of 3. Although I was a girl, I was no weaker than any boy my age. But as I grew up, I realized that people like us who practice martial arts generally have only 2 paths. One is to become a martial arts star, and the other is to open a martial arts school and take on disciples. But neither of those lives were what I wanted. Later, I became a bodyguard." Liang Yu slowly opened up, sharing her inner journey. Zhang Yi was not exactly an emotional guru, but he knew that when a woman talks about her past with you, it means she has let down her guard. It also meant that this was the biggest opportunity to make a move. "So, Zhang Yi timely played his part. So you became the best bodyguard, huh?" Mentioning her glorious past brought a smile to Liang Yu's lips. "Indeed, those were the highlights of my life." Later, Azure Sky Academy recruited me as a physical education teacher, mainly to teach self-defense to the children of nobles. After the apocalypse, everything we had no longer existed. Family, friends, status, money, all gone. All I had left was the duty to protect my students, and what has kept me going is just that lingering sense of mission. Liang Yu held her head, guilt-ridden, and said, "I know that according to your style, you would have let them fend for themselves long ago, letting them perish. I have thought about living more selfishly, but as a teacher, protecting my students is my duty. It's my creed. If I were to lose that creed, I wouldn't know what the point of surviving this apocalypse would be." As she spoke, Liang Yu's tears flowed freely. After hearing this, Zhang Yi suddenly felt a bit more understanding of her, then asked with concern, "People live just to be alive. Don't add too much unnecessary stuff to yourself." Zhang Yi patted Liang Yu's shoulder. "It used to be just you persevering, but now it's different. We at the shelter are a whole. We stand together. We're companions. We're family. The people here in the shelter are completely different from those students who burden you." As he spoke, Zhang Yi took Liang Yu's hand. "If you really need a creed, from now on, let us be your creed." Liang Yu's face instantly turned red. What are you saying?" Liang Yu, nearly 27 years old and due to her job, had never dated or even held hands with the opposite sex. Zhang Yi's sudden heartfelt gesture overwhelmed her. Zhang Yi continued, "If you've lost your faith, build a new one with us. We can all be your bonds. Don't live so hard. It would really pain me. At this moment, Liang Yu's blood rushed to her head. Although Zhang Yi's words were quite cheesy, they seemed to be effective on her. This kind of confession-like interaction greatly increased her favorable impression of Zhang Yi. Liang Yu shyly pulled her hand back, unable to meet Zhang Yi's eyes. Thank you. I feel much better. Seeing that the time was right, Zhang Yi planned to stop while ahead, and then sincerely asked, feeling better now? Having someone to talk to does help a lot, but I'm still very disappointed in those students. Liang Yu paused for a moment and then gently nodded. Maybe they just need to grow up some more. Zhang Yi didn't want to say much more. He knew that Liang Yu wouldn't be able to give up on those students just yet, but at least he had significantly weakened their importance in her mind today. After leaving Liang Yu's room and coming downstairs, he ran into Yang Xinxin, who asked meaningfully, "Brother, did you win over Teacher Liang?" Zhang Yi shrugged and said, "More or less. I'm not really interested in your teacher. Teacher Liang is quite beautiful, and you're not interested, brother? You really have high standards." Then, Zhang Yi moved closer to Yang Xinxin and told her about the day's events. She is beautiful, but she comes with troubles. I hate troubles the most. I don't even know why those students are worth worrying about, using the food she works so hard to obtain in Su Family Town. Yang Xinxin's disgust was apparent. Those guys really could do such disgusting things. Zhang Yi said indifferently, "I've already played the good cop. Next, it's your turn to play the bad cop. It would be best if Liang Yu completely loses heart in those guys. That way, I can deal with them without any worries." Yang Xinxin smirked. "Of course, I should definitely lend a hand, shouldn't I?" After this ordeal, Liang Yu's attitude towards those students will definitely not be the same as before. The next day, Uncle Yu quickly came up and asked, "Do you want us to come with you? It wouldn't be good if we run into enemies again." Zhang Yi patted Flower on the shoulder. "No need, I'll just take Flower. You guys stay here and keep building the defenses. We need someone to watch the house." Lu Karen, dressed in a tactical uniform, was excited and playfully saluted Zhang Yi. "Lu Karen is ready for battle, awaiting your orders, leader." Seeing her playful and cute demeanor, Zhang Yi couldn't help but pinch her nose. "You little rascal." Lu Karen stuck out her tongue. "I feel super cool in this outfit." Zhang Yi teased, "Clothes can be deceiving, especially for women." Lu Karen playfully punched Zhang Yi's shoulder. Their playful banter resembled that of a couple newly in love. Zhang Yi pulled out a handgun and handed it to Lu Karen. "All right, let's head out. The situation outside is uncertain. Let's go and come back quickly without delay. You can handle this, right?" Lu Karen's eyes lit up, and she immediately took the gun and slipped it into her side pouch. "No problem." The two left the shelter. Zhang Yi had already decided on the destination, the renowned Expansive Group. Their building materials were world-class high-end goods. Crucially, they were also the designated supplier for the War Dragon Group, and since his shelter was constructed by the War Dragon Group, Zhang Yi believed their warehouse would definitely have the materials needed for the shelter. On the way, Lu Karen brought up the question from yesterday again. "Big brother, about that question from yesterday, can you talk to me about it properly now?" Zhang Yi glanced at Lu Karen and asked, "Do you really dislike the other students?" Lu Karen nodded vigorously. "Those guys were too harsh on Yang Xinxin at the beginning. They were pretty awful to me too. Honestly, I don't want to see them, much less live with them." Listening to Lu Karen's complaints, Zhang Yi kept a slight smile on his face, even feeling tempted to share his plan with her. But then he thought better of it. Considering Lu Karen's bluntness, if she accidentally spilled the beans, it could create problems if Liang Yu found out ahead of time. So Zhang Yi switched tactics. "Don't worry, I dislike those guys too. I definitely won't let them disturb our peaceful life. Let those jerks live across the river. With their self-sufficiency skills, they'll starve or freeze to death sooner or later. And who knows, maybe they'll accidentally get into trouble if we clash with other forces again. Of course, I promised Liang Yu I wouldn't touch them, so it's all up to their luck now." After understanding Zhang Yi's stance, Lu Karen finally felt relieved, but she then worriedly approached him. "Big brother, Teacher Liang is a very soft-hearted woman. What if those guys run into danger and she brings them near our shelter?" Zhang Yi dismissed the concern with a laugh. "It's the apocalypse now. Human life is cheap. I promised Liang Yu, but even if I can't keep that promise, she should be able to understand. It will depend on how you and Yang Xinxin act. You know Teacher Liang loves her students. If my words don't carry weight, you two will have to try harder." Lu Karen bluntly said, "I get what you mean, big brother. So you want me and Yang Xinxin to sort of brainwash Teacher Liang? Compared to those unlucky kids from Su Family Town, you and Yang Xinxin are undoubtedly more favored by Liang Yu. You don't need me to tell you how to make her love you more, right?" "Understood." Soon, they arrived near the factory of Expansive Group. Just when Zhang Yi suddenly spotted 3 vehicles parked not far away, he quickly grabbed his binoculars for a closer look. He saw 3 modified combat vehicles parked ahead, and Lu Karen, curious, asked, "Big brother, what do you see?" Zhang Yi handed the binoculars to Lu Karen, who, after taking a look, couldn't help but criticize. "This thing looks like a mishmash. Can it even run? What have they modified it into? It's a total mess. Makes me want to gouge my eyes out." Zhang Yi sighed and said, "I really underestimated their efficiency. That group has already invaded from the border towards West Mountain Base. To prevent any surprise attacks, Zhang Yi cautiously activated the dimensional gate right in front of their vehicle. Zhang Yi hesitated, not wanting to engage in any conflicts right now, but also eager to repair the shelter, so he had to go over there, yet without knowing who these people were and what their capabilities were, acting rashly was not his style. At this moment, Liu Karen excitedly said, "Big brother, the cost-performance ratio of these people's modifications is too low. The maximum speed can't possibly exceed 20 kilometers per hour. Moreover, the modifications are so rough that the fuel consumption is several times that of a snow vehicle. They really are spending money like water." They deployed 3 vehicles in one go. Hearing this, Zhang Yi had a moment of inspiration and suddenly asked, "You're saying these vehicles burn a lot of fuel, right?" Liu Karen put down the binoculars, her face full of disgust, and said, "Yeah, these off-road vehicles weigh much more than a snow vehicle. The modifications not only add weight but are also barely functional, consuming at least 5 times the fuel of our vehicle." Upon hearing this, Zhang Yi immediately realized, these days, gasoline is hard to come by. Initially, West Mountain Base was reluctant to use snow vehicles. The only ones who could afford such luxury are those holed up in the oil refinery, the Radiant Prosperity Base. Radiant Prosperity Base is nearly across the entire Heavenly Sea City from here. Now that he had identified these people, Zhang Yi felt more confident. Having come all this way, he couldn't return empty-handed. He planned to talk to these people. If he could peacefully get the materials, that would be ideal. But if things turned rough, Zhang Yi wasn't afraid to confront them. Zhang Yi said to Liu Karen, "There might be a conflict soon. Prepare yourself mentally." Zhang Yi drove the car directly up to them, and before he even got close, 5 or 6 people using the vehicle for cover aimed their guns at him. A long-haired man shouted, "Stop! This place has been claimed by our Radiant Prosperity Base. Which faction are you with?" Zhang Yi remained vigilant, having activated his 4 times speed ability. If anyone dared to pull the trigger, he would be able to retaliate instantly. Zhang Yi raised his hands and stepped out of the car, Flower following closely. "Don't misunderstand. I mean no harm. You got to this factory first, and I have no objections to that. I just need some materials and hope you could accommodate that." The long-haired man noticed the sword emblem on Zhang Yi's clothing and his expression became much more serious. He thought to himself, wasn't West Mountain Base wiped out? Could this be a remnant? The members of Radiant Prosperity Base started discussing among themselves. A wiped out base wouldn't have any formidable people left, would it? But his vehicle looks pretty good. Don't act rashly. Anyone who can survive this long isn't ordinary, especially someone who doesn't show any fear even when faced with so many of us. He's definitely tough. Call the leader over. Then, someone said to Zhang Yi, "We need to consult with our leader about this. We'll talk to you after he arrives." Zhang Yi maintained a relaxed smile on his face, though internally he was quite anxious. At that moment, he saw someone using the same method he had previously used, entering the factory through a skylight with a rope. After a while, a man with a large beard climbed up from inside the factory. The flame emblem on his chest indicated he was a captain-level figure from Radiant Prosperity Base, meaning even if he wasn't a mutant, he was definitely a formidable character. Zhang Yi did not intend to start a conflict. Getting the materials peacefully was the best option, especially since Zhang Yi did not want to make enemies with both Morning Dew and Radiant Prosperity. Captain Gao Yuan of Radiant Prosperity Base coldly asked, "Are you from West Mountain Base?" Zhang Yi had a moment of inspiration, since the other party didn't know his true identity, and he was wearing the uniform of West Mountain Base. He said, "I am indeed the captain of the West Mountain Base Special Forces, Zhang Beihai." As the base with the strongest armed forces among the 4 major bases, even though it was known that the base had been destroyed, it was impossible to assess the remaining forces' strength. Sure enough, Gao Yuan's expression became serious when he heard Zhang Yi introduce himself. "So, you are the captain from West Mountain Base. No wonder you dare to come here alone." Gao Yuan's demeanor turned somewhat unfriendly. "Are you here to drive us away? I must say up front, your stronghold has been taken down, and your remaining forces are not enough to compete with my Radiant Prosperity Base, so I advise you to be sensible." Gao Yuan believed Zhang Yi's words, as the combat uniform was officially crafted and only available to their 4 major bases, making it extremely difficult for outsiders to replicate, especially in this post-apocalyptic world. Zhang Yi calmly said, "It's just a small materials factory. If friends from Radiant Prosperity Base really like it, then take it. However, I came here today just to pick up a few materials, and I hope you can understand." After hearing this, Gao Yuan's expression became complicated. They were ordered to occupy this location originally to seize some key resources, and they hadn't considered that West Mountain Base still had remnants. However, considering there were only 2 of them, it seemed unrealistic that they could move much material. After thinking it over, Gao Yuan said to Zhang Yi, "You can go in, but I'll only give you half an hour." Hearing this, Zhang Yi quickly signaled Liu Karen to get out of the car. The materials needed Liu Karen's expertise to identify, and Zhang Yi needed to keep her close to ensure her safety. Liu Karen curiously asked, "What about the car? Aren't we going to put it away?" At this point, Zhang Yi didn't elaborate much, as he would never easily show his abilities in front of strangers. They couldn't take it anyway. The 2 headed towards the factory, with Flower following behind them. Just then, Gao Yuan suddenly drew his pistol pistol at an extremely fast speed and pulled the trigger directly at Zhang Yi. Fortunately, Flower's body inflated like a balloon in an instant, firmly shielding them from behind. Flower's eyes turned blood red as he turned his head back, and bullets from about a dozen people came raining down, all blocked by Flower's massive body. During the battle at West Mountain Base, Flower also absorbed the power of several mutants, greatly enhancing its combat abilities. Facing such intense gunfire was like a mere tickle to it. The people from Radiant Prosperity Base were stunned. What kind of monster was this? They had never seen such a mutant creature before. Gao Yuan shouted, "Don't panic, aim for its eyes." Enraged, Flower charged headfirst at them, biting off the upper half of one man's body, causing the others to scatter in terror. At that moment, Zhang Yi noticed that they all began performing the same action. They took out syringe-like devices and fiercely injected themselves in their arms. It seemed to be some kind of drug to enhance their fighting abilities. Indeed, their veins bulged and their expressions turned feral almost immediately. Flower was unfazed by these changes and, after a loud howl, charged forward. The men quickly dodged. Their speed had clearly increased, but Flower, known for its agility as a feline creature, was not something humans could outpace with just a drug. Liu Karen clung tightly to Zhang Yi. Just then, a blazing bullet was shot towards Zhang Yi from behind. Zhang Yi then realized their tactic. The drug soldiers were meant to distract Flower while their real target was him. Zhang Yi sensed the bullet wrapped in flames. Could this be the big bearded man's special ability? Zhang Yi activated Dimensional Gate at 4 times speed, instantly sucking in the bullet. Gao Yuan was dumbfounded. "You're a mutant too?" Zhang Yi sneered. "Now it's your turn to taste my bullets." Zhang Yi raised his dual guns and began firing continuously while gently telling Liu Karen, "Cover your ears." Liu Karen obediently covered her ears from behind, not forgetting to watch Zhang Yi, who looked utterly composed. Gao Yuan and his men instinctively dodged, but even though they spread out, the bullets followed a bizarre trajectory through the air, striking each of them precisely in the head, including Captain Gao Yuan. All were instantly killed. Even in their dying moment, their eyes were full of confusion and disbelief. Bullets that turn corners? How could that be possible? Zhang Yi arrogantly blew on the gun barrel, while the look of admiration in Liu Karen's eyes was nearly overflowing. Nearby, Flower quickly finished the fight, chewing a few of the men before disdainfully spitting them out. Looking at the corpses scattered around, Zhang Yi sighed in resignation. "I just wanted to talk, but you had to sneak attack, forcing me to take action. I'm really a pacifist, but you always push me. It's so hard being me." Now he had provoked both Morning Dew and Radiant Prosperity bases. Dealing with one was already troublesome enough. If they teamed up against him, that would really complicate things. However, there was no helping it. The other party was stepping out of line, and he couldn't just indulge them. At that moment, Liu Karen came up excitedly and said, "Brother Zhang Yi, you are so cool. They couldn't even touch the hem of your clothes before they all went down." Those guys really overestimated themselves. As Zhang Yi crouched down to search Gao Yuan's body, he said to Liu Karen, "Although my ability isn't meant for combat, I have absorbed the power of so many mutants that, without being modest, I'm now frighteningly strong." Liu Karen curiously asked, "Big brother, what are you doing?" Zhang Yi found a syringe on Gao Yuan and said, "Got it." He held up the syringe and muttered, "Is this the stimulant they were using just now? It seems to be more potent than the ones Joker provided. I'll take it back for Joker to study. It might come in handy later, maybe even save our lives in a critical moment." Then, Zhang Yi also found some communication devices on their bodies. "I'll take these back for Yang Xinxin to analyze. Maybe we can get some intel on Radiant Prosperity Base." At that moment, Liu Karen, looking worried, said, "Brother Zhang Yi, should we leave here quickly? What if they have reinforcements? It could get messy." Zhang Yi laughed. "Radiant Prosperity Base is more than 200 kilometers away from here, across Heavenly Sea City. It's not easy for them to send support. Their fuel resources are so precious. They definitely need to keep most of their forces at home." As he spoke, Zhang Yi absorbed all the bodies into a different dimension and cleaned up the battlefield, even taking the makeshift combat vehicles with him. Although the conflict had erupted, delaying their discovery of the truth was beneficial since his defenses still needed time to be fortified. After cleaning up the scene, Zhang Yi said seriously, "Let's quickly find the materials and get back to repair the shelter. It looks like we can't avoid a big battle coming up." Zhang Yi then strutted toward the factory. He couldn't be bothered to break through the wall himself, so he instructed Flower, "Go make a path for me. I'll reward you with 10 packs of dried fish when we get back." At those words, Flower instantly transformed into a giant beast and charged forward, smashing a large hole in the factory wall. The two entered through the hole into the vast factory. Zhang Yi followed Liu Karen's pointing. Wherever she pointed, he collected. He took any potentially useful materials, leaving nothing behind. If the factory hadn't been so large, Zhang Yi would have liked to take everything. Soon, the two of them, along with their feline companion, drove away from the factory. In the car, Zhang Yi suddenly sighed and said, "The fuse has been lit. Conflict could erupt at any moment now." At that moment, Zhang Yi thought to himself, since things have come to this, he might as well take advantage of the situation to fully resolve the troubles with Su Family Town. He already had a rough plan in mind, but he didn't intend to tell Liu Karen about it just yet. yet. Instead, he said to Lu Karen, let's keep what happened here today just between us for now. Lu Karen was puzzled and asked, why is that? Wouldn't it be better to let everyone know in advance so they can be mentally prepared? Zhang Yi didn't go into much detail, but said seriously, I will urge everyone to speed up the construction of the defenses and prepare as thoroughly as possible. But what happened today might cause unnecessary panic. When the time is right, I will tell everyone. Understand? Lu Karen was silent for 2 seconds, then nodded vigorously. Understood. I know brother must be considering the bigger picture. Even though she didn't know Zhang Yi's real motives, her loyalty was with Zhang Yi. Whatever decision he made, she would support it unconditionally. Soon, Zhang Yi returned to the construction site of the defensive line, where Uncle Yu immediately came up to ask, how did it go today? Did you encounter any trouble? Zhang Yi feigned calm and smiled. Everything went smoothly, and we got a lot of materials. Zhang Yi continued, I've always said that people from other forces can barely manage their own territories, let alone covet the resources of West Mountain. Hearing this, Lian Yu's expression visibly relaxed. If that's really the case, that's great. My students will be safe. But then Zhang Yi suddenly changed the topic. However, I also think your concerns are not unreasonable. Although it is safe for now, it doesn't hurt to be prepared. Personally, I don't mind if your students need to move here in case of danger, but I feel bad about Yang Xinxin and Lu Karen. After all, there's deep animosity between them that can't be resolved quickly. Zhang Yi knew he had to change his tone. If he kept promoting safety, and if danger did come, Lian Yu might link it back to him, so it was better to shift the focus of the conflict onto someone else. Sure enough, Lian Yu hesitated upon hearing Zhang Yi's analysis. Both Yang Xinxin and Lu Karen were closer to her heart. They had been good students, unlike those from Su family town who only caused her trouble. At that moment, Zhang Yi subtly signaled Lu Karen with a gesture behind his back, and she quickly picked up on it, then said with a look of distress, Teacher Liang, I really don't want to live with them. You don't know how cruel they were to me and Yang Xinxin back at Azure Sky Academy. Just thinking about it makes me lose sleep at night. Hearing Lu Karen's complaint, Liang Yu's face showed guilt. She knew that Yang Xinxin and Lu Karen had been ostracized and bullied by other students, but at that time, she was too busy dealing with Flower and neglected their feelings. Now, realizing she hadn't taken good care of Yang Xinxin and Lu Karen, who had spoken up for her to stay in the shelter, Liang Yu felt conflicted. She put her arm around Lu Karen's shoulder and said sincerely, you are all my students, and I hope everyone can survive, but they still can't fend for themselves, and if they get hurt under my care, I would feel terribly guilty. Seeing this, Zhang Yi quickly intervened to prevent Lu Karen from being persuaded by Liang Yu. He deliberately changed the subject. Let's not talk about this for now. We should hurry back and sort out the materials. It's crucial to get the shelter repaired quickly. Saying this, Zhang Yi pulled Lu Karen away and gave Liang Yu a reassuring look. Liang Yu was suddenly touched. Is he trying to help me by handling Lu Karen? After returning to the workshop, Zhang Yi took out all the useful materials. Lu Karen informed Zhang Yi that these materials were more than enough, and the construction could be completed in just 2 or 3 days if aesthetics were not considered. Zhang Yi waved his hand. What's the point of aesthetics at a time like this? Just focus on making it sturdy. Lu Karen stretched her arms. Brother Zhang Yi, leave this side to me. You go and take care of the defenses. Following that, Zhang Yi went to Yang Xinxin's room and knocked on the door. Yang Xinxin opened the door with a delighted expression, showing her obedient side only in front of Zhang Yi. Brother, do you need something? After locking the door, Zhang Yi recounted the day's events to Yang Xinxin. Considering her intelligence and cunning, Zhang Yi wanted to hear her thoughts. She immediately analyzed, in just a few days, you've managed to offend both Radiant Prosperity and Morning Dew bases. Although they probably don't know who's behind it yet, it shouldn't be hard to trace it back to you. They lost precious mutants and will definitely investigate thoroughly. They might even come here soon. However, these people are not to be feared. After all, they don't have connections like Chen Xinyan, who could get hold of missiles, so they shouldn't pose a threat to the shelter's safety. Why not use this opportunity to take care of the students from Su family town? Yang Xinxin spoke very calmly. She didn't particularly despise those students, as she hadn't really suffered at Azure Sky Academy. Although she appeared to be bullied, those who had physically attacked her were mostly taken care of by Flower. Zhang Yi smiled. That's exactly what needs to be done. Liang Yu is still very useful to me, so we'll have to employ a strategy of using others to eliminate them. After speaking, Zhang Yi took out a signal jammer and connected it to the power supply, then pulled out the communication devices collected today. These are the satellite phones from members of Radiant Prosperity Base. See if you can extract any crucial intelligence from them. Pass me the data once it's transferred. I need it. Yang Xinxin confidently replied, easy, brother. I'll thoroughly analyze the data and hand it over to you once I'm done. Elsewhere, in the vast snowy landscape, a huge refinery was still in operation, noticeably raising the temperature around the plant compared to the surrounding areas. At that moment, inside a workshop at the Radiant Prosperity Base, 2 ragged men were tied up on the ground. A soldier reported, leader of the 5 soldiers who attempted to desert. 3 have been killed, and these 2 were captured. Please decide their fate. The 2 men hurriedly cowed out, leader, spare our lives. We promise never to run again. Please give us another chance. Xiao Hong Honglian, walking up to them in high heels, said, "I have provided you with food and shelter. Why would you still want to run? What can you do outside the refinery? Here you might have to work, but at least you won't freeze or starve to death. What are you after?" Xiao Honglian's voice grew colder. "If you don't tell the truth, I'll kill you right now." The two men looked at each other, too afraid to speak. Xiao Honglian said mockingly, "Don't think I don't know you wanted to flee to the snow worship sect's territory. Is that hypocritical bitch really worth running to?" Frightened, the two men couldn't say anything. They just kept knocking their heads on the ground, begging for mercy. Xiao Honglian lost interest in questioning them and turned to Zhuge Qingting. "Didn't you say you've developed something new?" Zhuge Qingting adjusted his glasses. The technical department indeed made a breakthrough. It's a new type of collar that can be filled with a micro-explosive. If anyone dares to run again, we can execute them remotely. As soon as he finished speaking, the soldiers put the collars on the two men. Xiao Honglian was eager to test the device. "How far does it work?" Zhuge Qingting handed over a remote control, "About 5 kilometers. So as soon as we detect a slave has vanished, we can immediately detonate it. This should serve as a deterrent." Hearing this, Xiao Honglian was intrigued. "Let's play a game. I'll give you 10 minutes. If you can get out of my remote control range, your lives will be spared. You might want to pray because this is a brand new device, and it might not work so well." Without thinking, the two men dashed out. This was their only chance for survival. After 10 minutes, Xiao Honglian pressed the button on her device, and Zhuge Qingting took out a communicator to check with the soldiers. They didn't escape the range. One was successfully detonated, and one was a dud. "Just give the word, and I'll execute the remaining one too." Xiao Honglian said with slight anger, "Is the tech department useless? When their technology reaches half the level of West Mountain Base, I'll be satisfied. But I always keep my word. Since his luck was so good, let him run. I want to see if he can make it alive to the snow worship sect's territory. Lock all those idiots in the tech department in the darkroom for 3 days." Zhuge Qingting consoled, "Our technicians aren't as good as those at West Mountain Base, but it's not entirely their fault. After all, most of the professional weapons engineers were taken by the military long ago. Our base's tech staff are mostly selected from local universities and research institutes." Xiao Honglian sighed. "To keep these damned slaves from thinking about escaping, I really have to break my back. But it's all because of that hypocritical woman from the snow worship sect. Someone spread rumors that the leader of the snow worship sect can cure all pains, and that every follower there gets food and shelter. Most importantly, they say everyone is equal there, free from discrimination and oppression. This has led to a constant drain of civilians from all major powers, particularly the Radiant Prosperity Base. Without population, there is no labor force. Xiao Honglian cannot simply ignore this situation. Her method is to enforce a strict policy. Every civilian at the Radiant Prosperity Base has the base's mark branded on their face, making it easy to identify any deserters from Radiant Prosperity Base. Should the snow worship sect dare to shelter slaves with the brand, they must risk becoming enemies with the Radiant Prosperity Base. Even so, the snow worship sect continues to covertly absorb these fleeing slaves. This has led to the most tense relationship between Radiant Prosperity Base and snow worship sect. After all, they are not like West Mountain Base, where the lowest tier of people are in West Mountain Base's 4th life pod, with no worries about them escaping. The labor force of the Radiant Prosperity Base is in the ground-level oil refinery, and no matter how tight the blockade, there will always be those who risk their lives for freedom. Zhuge Qingting continued to reassure, "We shouldn't be too pessimistic. Now we just need to figure out a way to carve a big chunk out of West Mountain's territory to greatly alleviate our current pressure. After all, at the end of the day, it's all about resources." At that moment, Xiao Honglian waved her hand. "To get a big piece of the pie from West Mountain, we first need to stabilize our own main base. Let the tech department intensify research and quickly improve the stability of the collars. Safety doesn't need to be ensured, but effectiveness must be guaranteed." Zhuge Qingting nodded knowingly, taking Xiao Honglian's instructions to heart. Suddenly, Xiao Honglian asked, "Has the dispatched Vanguard team achieved anything?" "Except for the team led by Gao Yuan, which has not yet reported back. The others have returned." Hearing Gao Yuan's name, Xiao Honglian frowned. Gao Yuan was her cousin, who before the apocalypse was the captain of the Heavenly Sea City Armed Police Force. He was defiant and respected by few at the base. Hearing this, a hint of unease flashed through Xiao Honglian's mind. Could he have encountered some danger? Zhuge Qingting pushed his glasses up. Currently, the major powers are quite restrained and won't easily start conflicts unless absolutely necessary. So even if they really encounter other forces, the other side should also give face. Only in the case of competing for a very precious resource would they possibly break the tacit agreement and come to blows. Xiao Honglian's gaze sharpened. The major resource points of Heavenly Sea City have been mostly devoured, and while the remaining resources are useful, they probably aren't worth starting a major conflict over. I am still relatively confident about the other powers. I am not worried about Morning Dew Base, and Emerald Waterside Base also adopts a non-aggression stance. The only concern left is Snow Worship Sect. Just then, a soldier hurriedly reported, "We can't find Captain Gao Yuan, and even 3 modified combat vehicles have vanished into thin thin air. It was only then that Xiao Honglian realized something serious had happened. After all, even if her cousin was reckless, he wouldn't easily break contact with the base, so something must have happened. The soldier continued. Their last known location was near the Expansive Group's factory. After that, we lost all contact. Moreover, the Expansive Group's factory shows signs of damage, and almost all the materials inside have been cleared out. Captain Gao Yuan and the others, along with their vehicles, have disappeared. Xiao Honglian quickly asked, "Don't the vehicles have satellite tracking devices?" The soldier continued, "That's the bizarre part. We can't detect any signals at all, as if they disappeared into thin air." Xiao Honglian immediately became anxious. It seems the other side has been planning this for a long time. Could this be a signal for war? Xiao Honglian frantically brainstormed, analyzing all potential suspects. After excluding other possibilities, could it be remnants of West Mountain Base? Or perhaps they hadn't been wiped out, but merely shifted their base. Now they were unaware of Zhang Yi's existence, and couldn't imagine that Heavenly Sea City still harbored such a formidable force. At this point, Zhuge Qingting suggested, "Gao Yuan's last known location is closest to Morning Dew Base. Since our relationship with them is still good, why don't we contact them first to see if they have any useful information?" Thinking this over, Xiao Honglian pulled out her satellite phone and directly called Wei Dinghai, the leader of Morning Dew Base. Xiao Honglian bluntly said, "Brother Wei, my cousin disappeared near the Expansive Group. Do you know about this?" Wei Dinghai cautiously replied, "This matter has nothing to do with us. We've also had people disappear from our base, including a mutant who was one of my top aides. I was about to ask who's behind this. Nowadays, mutants are so scarce that even if there are wild mutants out there, they shouldn't be able to stand against well-trained soldiers." Hearing this, Xiao Honglian understood Wei Dinghai's point. The existing powers in Heavenly Sea City were now clear, with West Mountain Base destroyed and the Emerald Waterside Base smiths only wanting to keep to themselves. Thus, only one possibility remained: the damnable Snow Worship sect. Wei Dinghai also found it very plausible. Now the only ones bold enough to strike at two major bases simultaneously could only be Snow Worship sect. The two seemed to instantly form an understanding. They had long disapproved of Snow Worship sect. This religious organization had been absorbing followers, causing their workers to continually defect. Now with a legitimate reason, they certainly wouldn't miss the opportunity, even if they weren't responsible, to resolve a long-standing grudge. After discussing, they decided to find an opportunity to jointly attack the headquarters of Snow Worship sect. At that moment, the real instigator, Zhang Yi, was at home building defenses and a shelter. The shape of the defenses was almost complete, and Zhang Yi began arranging various weapons on them. All weapons could be connected to Zhang Yi's smartphone, allowing him to potentially create a spectacular barrage of fire with just a few taps on his phone. Lu Karen came over to report on the progress. The exterior wall of the shelter has been repaired. This meant that all defense installations were now complete. Although they were not professional builders and the walls were not very aesthetically pleasing, as long as the materials were sturdy, it was fine. With everything successfully completed, Zhang Yi felt much more relaxed. "I thought the two bases would take some action, but it seems they are quite patient. It looks like their leaders are not simple." Little did they know that they had no idea about Zhang Yi's force, and were currently planning how to attack the Snow Worship sect's headquarters. At dinner time, several women prepared a big table of dishes to celebrate the completion of the project. Before they had eaten much, Liang Yu put down her chopsticks. "Zhang Yi, can I have today's food first? I need to deliver it to the students." Without a second thought, Zhang Yi took out a large bag of food, which Liang Yu took and prepared to leave. Just as Liang Yu was about to leave, Yang Xinxin came up thoughtfully and asked, "Teacher Liang, you hardly ate anything. Did those students upset you again?" Liang Yu was already full of grievances, and Yang Xinxin's question brought her emotions to the surface. Yang Xinxin held Liang Yu's hand and said in a low, soothing voice, "They are really too much. It's not your fault, so why should you bear all this? Even if you don't take care of them, you have no responsibility." Teacher Liang froze for a few seconds upon hearing this, but ultimately she pulled away from Yang Xinxin's hand. "I can't do that. No matter what, I am their teacher. If I don't take care of them, no one will." In fact, after days of relentless indoctrination, her thoughts had subtly changed. She had probably completely given up on those students by now. It was just a lingering obsession. Zhang Yi watched this scene with inward delight, thinking, "I'm not the villain here. Using others to do the dirty work doesn't dirty my own hands. I'm really a genius." The next day during training, Zhang Yi said to Liang Yu, "If you really think your students aren't safe in Su Family Town, then discuss with them about moving near the shelter. But since this involves everyone at the shelter, we should discuss it together." However, Liang Yu said, "Let's keep things as they are for now. I've talked a lot with Yang Xinxin and Lu Karen recently about the harm they suffered during their time at Azure Sky Academy. I have an inescapable responsibility. I can't ignore their feelings anymore. Besides, the situation isn't so tense now, and they are doing quite well in Su Family Town." Zhang Yi smiled and nodded. "That's the spirit. The world is still full of hope, and there's really no need to be constantly fearful. Maintaining a good mindset is very important." Liang Yu was warmed by his words. Touched, she said, "I really didn't expect it. You seem so cold on the the outside, but your heart is so warm inside. Zhang Yi also started today's training, focusing on jiu-jitsu. Liang Yu mentioned that jiu-jitsu is ideal for sudden close combat, and they began practicing Brazilian jiu-jitsu today. Liang Yu's skills were very proficient, and she quickly locked Zhang Yi in a firm hold, at one point even choking him from behind, maintaining firm control. Zhang Yi seemed to thoroughly enjoy the experience. Zhang Yi could clearly sense that Liang Yu's mindset had slowly started to change. Although she still insisted on delivering food to the students every day, her smile became more frequent when she was at the shelter, and she no longer maintained the aloof and serious demeanor she once had. That night, Zhang Yi lay in bed thinking for a long time. Should I start my plan now? Now is the best time to deal with those troublesome students in Su Family Town. Just by secretly placing the confiscated satellite phones in Su Family Town, people from Radiant Prosperity Base should be able to find them quickly. By then, I won't need to lift a finger, but this could also potentially draw them here sooner. My defenses are so obvious, it's only a matter of time before I'm discovered. Zhang Yi was unsure of how to decide. According to his own thoughts, it would be best if they never found out that it was him who killed their people, and everyone could live in peace. After all, he now just wanted to live a peaceful life with a few women, tired of all the fighting and killing. But upon further reflection, he realized that was just wishful thinking. Those he had killed were mutants, likely core members of their bases, and the adversaries would certainly not let this go. Even if they were fortunate enough not to get caught, once they took over West Mountain, they would surely discover Lark Manor. In that case, conflict was inevitable. Since the outcome would be the same either way, he decided to take the initiative. Thinking this, Zhang Yi took out the satellite phone, then handed it to Flower, instructing it to place the phone in the student's residence. Flower quietly left the shelter and ran towards Su Family Town. Meanwhile, in the celestial tribute district of Heavenly Sea City, snow covered the tall buildings and skyscrapers, a place that once bustled with the densest population in Heavenly Sea City, lively with traffic and nightlife every day. But after the apocalypse, it seemed to have turned into a cemetery of ice and snow. However, a large cathedral was brightly lit at this moment, packed with thousands of devout followers squeezed together, their hands clasped in prayer, looking up earnestly, murmuring continuous prayers. Their gaze was directed towards a woman in a red cloak standing under a massive cross, her fingers interlocked and a face full of compassionate sorrow. As she parted her lips, a deep prayer echoed through the cathedral, and the entire church flowed with a strange power, slowly rotating with the chanting of the sect leader, Yuan Konya. Yuan Konya suddenly raised her voice. May the snow god forever bless the children of the snow worship sect. Let us prove it with our souls and bodies. Her voice seemed to possess a mysterious magic, soothing the soul, momentarily making people forget their hunger and cold. At that moment, a gaunt woman holding a child ran up to Yuan Konya, trembling as she knelt down, lifting her dying child high. Please, leader, save my child. Seeing this, Yuan Konya's eyes filled with compassion. She gently placed her right hand on the child's forehead, and suddenly, a white light swept through the cathedral. Moments later, the child cried out loud. Hearing this sound, every believer in the church was immensely excited, continuously shouting, a miracle. This was one of Yuan Konya's abilities, known as grace. It could instantly heal physical illnesses, and it was precisely because of this ability that the snow worship sect was able to attract so many followers. However, after performing several times, a trace of fatigue appeared on Yuan Konya's face. The high priest quickly stepped forward and said, Leader, please rest for a while. The grace segment can continue after you've recovered. There's no rush. But Yuan Konya pushed the high priest, Jing Yishan, away and said firmly, Continue with the grace. However, as soon as she finished speaking, a loud explosion sounded from behind, followed by continuous, piercing gunfire. The church instantly became chaotic, and Jing Yishan sensed trouble, immediately shouting, Tong Zhan, Dai Mei, protect the leader. Everyone else, follow me out to confront the enemy. Yuan Konya is the symbol of the snow worship sect and typically does not manage the church affairs directly. Most tasks are overseen by the high priest, Jing Yishan. Several people rushed out of the church, while Yuan Konya continued to pray, murmuring a prayer, May the snow god protect the devout followers and lead us away from war and suffering. Inspired, many of the younger and stronger congregants, their eyes filled with fervor and devotion, moved towards the main door, following the priests. After the doors were firmly shut, Yuan Konya calmly said, Continue with the grace ceremony. Outside the church, the sky was ablaze with gunfire. The combined forces of Radiant Prosperity and Morning Dew had arrived. The disappearance of their mutants had enraged them, and they weren't interested in uncovering the truth. If they believed it was the work of the snow worship sect, that was enough. In this apocalyptic world, might makes right, and this was also an opportunity to suppress this growing religious force. Both bases, originally built by the nation for war readiness, were not short of advanced weapons and ample ammunition. In contrast, the snow worship sect was a mixed bag. Even if they had some firearms and ammunition, most were of average quality from the black market, and most followers were not trained to use them. The defenders suffered heavy casualties, yet they all looked resolute and did not shrink back. One even strapped himself with explosives and shouted, For the snow snow god before rushing into the enemy ranks. Xiao Honglian, witnessing this scene, was somewhat shocked. They've brainwashed the followers into fearless human bombs. This damned cult. Let's take this opportunity to eradicate them all. Xiao Honglian waved her hand and pointed towards the church not far away, shouting, "Charge! Capture that bitch Yuan Kongya. I want to tear her charlatan skin apart. Whoever captures her, I reward him with 50 kilograms of beef." At that moment, several figures appeared at the church's exit. Seeing them, the eyes of the snow worship sect followers immediately lit up with hope. The priests have come. Jing Yixian, leading 3 priests, looked fiercely at the enemy. Kill them. All soldiers focused their fire on Jing Yixian, but facing the barrage of bullets, Jing Yixian remained unflustered. He slowly raised his right hand, and a golden barrier formed in front of him, absorbing all the bullets as if they were stuck in a soft rubber wall. With the release of his hand, all the bullets fell to the ground. "Are you trying to tear up the peace agreement?" Xiao Honglian stared at this stern man, somewhat fearfully reciting word by word. "Jing Yixian, it's you who are breaking the agreement. You kill our mutants. Don't think we don't know." After saying this, she didn't plan to give him a chance to argue. She took out a large jug from behind her, uncorked it, and took a big gulp. After a brief moment of gathering strength, she spat out a massive fire dragon. The red flames illuminated the entire street, with the fire heading straight for Jing Yixian and his group. Seeing this, Jing Yixian spread his arms and, with a chant, forcibly pulled several cars out of the ice and snow with a loud bang, using them to block the surging wave of flames. But even though the fire was blocked, the intense heat still overwhelmed several of the mutants. Jing Yixian shouted, "Our snow worship sect has always been clear about our stance with various parties. We are committed to mutual respect, peaceful coexistence, and win-win cooperation. Could there be some misunderstanding here?" However, Xiao Honglian and Wei Dinghai turned a deaf ear. An arrow once shot does not return to the bow, and they had come to deliver a severe blow to the snow worship sect. The truth no longer mattered to them. Xiao Honglian waved her hand emphatically, "Attack fiercely." Wei Dinghai also showed no sign of weakness, ordering his soldiers to advance in file. Seeing that negotiations were no longer possible, Jing Yixian realized that the opponents were clearly intent on annihilating the snow worship sect. Now, only by fighting could he stop these madmen. Jing Yixian bellowed, "Full counterattack. In the name of the snow god, bring them divine punishment." As soon as his words fell, followers of the snow worship sect swarmed out from every corner like ants. Though ragged and emaciated, each one's eyes sparkled with hope, showing no trace of fear. Armed with kitchen knives and iron rods, they charged towards the enemy. Radiant Prosperity and Morning Dew, both bases equipped with sophisticated weaponry, were armed to the teeth. Especially in terms of cold protection, they were far superior to the civilian members of the snow worship sect. Xiao Honglian's fire dragon had also turned the icy and snowy scene into a sea of flames. Seeing this, Wei Dinghai did not hesitate to act. He took a deep breath, and the air around him instantly condensed into ice, quickly forming a thick, sturdy layer of armor on his body. Then he swung his right hand, and countless ice spikes shot towards the crowd like bullets. Following that, he leaped forward into the fray, initiating a frenzied slaughter. Under the cover of the blizzard, his figure gradually became blurred and hard to detect. In fact, both Xiao Honglian and Wei Dinghai had seized power in their respective shelters through military force. They were the strongest combatants in their forces. The combined strength of the two was no less than that of Ling Feng. Their collaboration instantly disoriented the snow worship sect, but the sect also had its own advantage: sheer numbers, and almost on a different scale. Under Jing Yixian's command, the followers charged relentlessly forward, falling like flies yet never retreating. Xiao Honglian couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. These idiots have really been brainwashed by the cult. They're all ready to die. Suddenly, a crazed follower, strapped with explosives, leaped from a high building and plunged into the enemy crowd. The violent explosion caused heavy losses to the allied forces. This scene made all soldiers' scalps tingle. This attack force wasn't their entire strength, as the majority of the troops had stayed back to defend their main bases. The combined forces amounted to just 200 or 300 soldiers. Although well equipped, they struggled to cope with the tens of thousands of sect followers swarming at them. Xiao Honglian turned to lock eyes with Wei Dinghai. "To catch the bandit, first catch the king. Let's coordinate to take down Jing Yixian." This plan coincided exactly with Wei Dinghai's intentions. Xiao Honglian took another big gulp of fuel and, as she activated her ability, fiery red patterns began to emerge on her skin, unleashing an ability known as the Inferno Furnace. Wei Dinghai also activated his Frost Lord ability, and in an instant, his figure merged with the ice and snow, disappearing from everyone's sight. Jing Yixian furrowed his brow, sensing the imminent danger. Before he could react, his right leg was forcefully grabbed. Wei Dinghai's arm emerged from the snow, firmly grasping his right leg, while directly ahead, Xiao Honglian raised her fiery red fist and punched him in the face. Accompanied by a fierce explosion, a massive snowstorm instantly upheaved everything within 100 meters. But when the dust settled, Jing Yixian was still standing, gasping for air. However, his arms were pitch black, having been struck by both ice and fire. Without timely and effective treatment, in this post post-apocalyptic world, his situation was extremely perilous. Xiao Honglian and Wei Dinghai stood not far away, clearly dissatisfied. Their combined attack had failed to kill Jing Yixin, which was truly regrettable. It turned out that at the critical moment, his followers had broken away from their entanglements and rushed over to block a significant amount of damage for him. This failure meant that their opponents would now be aware of and prepared for their abilities, making a similar opportunity unlikely in the future. Meanwhile, the followers of the Snow Worship sect were becoming increasingly numerous in the battle. Their eyes only showed madness, and they charged forward wielding knives, daggers, and even frying pans. They were not just unafraid of death, some even seemed to be seeking it. Even the battle-hardened soldiers were shaken by this sight. They're willing to sacrifice 10 or 20 lives for just one of ours. Continuing this way, even if they were to win, it would be a Pyrrhic victory, given the overwhelming numbers of the Snow Worship sect followers. Xiao Honglian and Wei Dinghai also sensed that the situation was dire. This style of fighting was completely unexpected. Normally, they would rely on their military strength to kill a number of people first, and the rest would naturally surrender or flee. But these endless followers of the Snow Worship sect were all madmen. Continuing this way, although we still have a high chance of winning, it would only result in a mutually destructive situation, which we cannot accept. After all, there is a powerful emerald waterside base to the north. With this in mind, Xiao Honglian suddenly shouted, "My cousin and his dozen men died, and your Snow Worship sect is the most likely suspect. Give me a reasonable explanation." Wei Dinghai added, "My trusted lieutenant, Wang Ruishuan, also died near West Mountain Base. Now in all of Heavenly Sea City, I can't think of any other force that would dare to strike at us. If you don't give us an explanation today, we will flatten your Snow Worship sect." The priests of the Snow Worship sect weren't fools. Originally poised for a fight to the death, they changed their tune to negotiation upon seeing the unfavorable situation. Han Chang gritted his teeth, his right hand transformed into a beastly claw, grabbed a soldier's head, and violently threw it towards Xiao Honglian, angrily saying, "What do the deaths in your two factions have to do with our Snow Worship sect? Please provide some evidence." Xiao Honglian swiftly dodged the attack and replied mockingly, "What are you talking about evidence for at a time like this? Do you want me to call the police for you?" Indeed, in a post-apocalyptic world where order has collapsed, might makes right. Jing Yixin stopped Han Chang, seemingly understanding why they had come to attack so angrily. "Our Snow Worship sect has always advocated peace, and we have always abided by our peace agreement with you. We have never killed any of your people." Hearing this, Wei Dinghai laughed. "If not you, then who? The people from Emerald Waterside Base wouldn't come all the way to Heron's River to strike at us. I can't think of any other force in Heavenly Sea City that would dare to attack both our factions simultaneously, and do it so covertly that almost no traces are left." Jing Yixin took a deep breath. "Have you considered that, besides the 4 main bases and the Snow Worship sect, there might be some other significant powers in Heavenly Sea City, possibly even on par with us?" Upon hearing this, Xiao Honglian and Wei Dinghai simultaneously retorted, "How is that possible? After the apocalypse, the 5 major regions were cleanly divided among us. Apart from the Snow Worship sect, which is an anomaly, there are no conditions elsewhere for a power to emerge." Jing Yixin countered, "It's not impossible. Haven't you noticed some significant disturbances in the Heron's River area over the past month?" Hearing this, both pondered for a moment. Among the 4 main bases, West Mountain Base was the strongest, but indeed, in the past month, there had been reports from scouts hearing frequent gunfire there. Still, no one believed that West Mountain Base could have been wiped out by that force. They thought the downfall of West Mountain Base must have been because they offended the River South domain. Wei Dinghai snapped back to reality. "Smooth talker, don't think a few words will shift our hatred. Why should we believe you?" Xiao Honglian bluntly pointed at Jing Yixin. "Unless you have evidence to prove your innocence, we will definitely destroy your Snow Worship sect today." Jing Yixin then addressed Xiao Honglian and Wei Dinghai. "Our people did go to West Mountain Base that day and encountered your Morning Dew Base's Wang Ruishuan, but they also met 3 people acting suspiciously who might actually be the murderers you're looking for." Han Chang added, "Those people were wearing combat uniforms of West Mountain Base, so we thought they were remnants of West Mountain Base. At that time, we didn't want to get involved in your base conflicts, so we left first. What happened after that, we don't know. I only just heard from you that Wang Ruishuan is dead." Wei Dinghai, looking serious, responded, "Are you saying there are still remnants of West Mountain Base lurking around, slowly regaining their strength and secret?" Xiao Honglian immediately replied, "That's impossible. Their shelters were destroyed by missiles, and all their supplies and resources were buried underground. What chance do they have to regain their strength? Besides, even if there were any survivors, they should be hiding out, not daring to strike at both of our factions simultaneously." Xiao Honglian spread her hands and said with a laugh, "Not now, and not even in the past. I don't think Chen Xinyan had the guts." Jing Yixin then said solemnly, "Is there a possibility that the recent disturbances in the Heron's River area resulted in West Mountain Base being defeated? We don't know about that force, and they don't know about us either. That's why they could dare to act so boldly." Xiao Honglian and Wei Dinghai found this reasonable, as normally, the 5 major powers insiders would balance each other out, and none would dare to initiate conflict rashly. Only outsiders would be likely to do something like this. Wei Dinghai also had to admit that this explanation could account for the current situation. At this point, continuing the fight was no longer feasible. None of the three parties wanted to sustain significant losses, and no one knew if someone else was watching and laughing behind their backs. Xiao Honglian and Wei Dinghai exchanged a look and decided to go back and investigate thoroughly, but they naturally couldn't show weakness, so Xiao Honglian pointed at Jing Yishan with commanding presence. "We'll spare you today. We will certainly investigate this thoroughly back home. If we find out you were involved, we won't let it go. Next time, we'll wipe out your den in one fell swoop." Han Chang retorted defiantly, "Who's afraid of whom? If we're in the right, we fear no accusations. If you dare to come at us hard again, we'll make sure you don't return." On the way back, the two discussed their next steps. Wei Dinghai remarked, "I never expected the snow worship sect to grow so rapidly. That charlatan's brainwashing abilities are truly unique, attracting so many followers." Xiao Honglian also snorted, "That damned cult leader. Now even my slaves want to run off to them. There are still too many foolish humans who actually believe they can go to a heavenly kingdom with plentiful food and warm seasons after death." As the forces from the two bases reached the middle of their journey and were about to go their separate ways, Wei Dinghai got out of his vehicle and approached Xiao Honglian. "What's your plan moving forward?" Xiao Honglian smiled meaningfully. "We will definitely investigate this matter to the end. Aren't you doing the same?" Wei Dinghai shrugged. "What I meant was, should we continue to cooperate? Our target is likely the same. If there really is such a force, it's riskier to act alone. Think about it. Qin Xinyan is already dead, and the snow worship sect is greatly weakened today. If we join forces now, wouldn't controlling the entire Heavenly Sea City be as easy as flipping one's hand?" Xiao Honglian did not respond, but drove away from the scene. Wei Dinghai watched the departing convoy of Radiant Prosperity Base and sighed deeply. "This woman really is something. If I could take her down, then the entire Heavenly Sea City would be mine." At this moment, his deputy, Qin Jingwan, came over and said, "Boss, I always feel this woman is hiding something from us." Wei Dinghai dismissed it. "Isn't that obvious? There are no permanent friends, only permanent interests." Speaking of which, Wei Dinghai seemed to recall something important. The mysterious text message from before might not have been baseless after all. The suspect in the theft case at the southern warehouse, suspected to be the warehouse manager Zhang Yi, now resides in Yuelu district. Whoever was fighting West Mountain Base by Heron's River, it must have been that seemingly insignificant character from back then.